So the other day, I think I was probably in bed. I was scrolling through LinkedIn. This is probably, I don't think it was even a day ago. It was probably about a month ago. And a lot of it is not that useful. I mean, you hear some good stuff, but I came across this picture of what I didn't know what it was at the beginning, but it turned out to be this olive oil can, but it was something I hadn't actually seen before in terms of its design. It was pretty unique, to be honest. And so often we see olive oil in the supermarket. I don't think we really even take into account olive oil when we think about the shopping consumer experience. So I was just really intrigued, something I hadn't seen before. I'll put the picture in the show notes afterwards, as you can see what it says. I then clicked on it, and it turned out to be from this company called the Olive Oil Guy. And the founder is called Mazen. And I just thought, just based on the packaging, it looks sick. I have to reach out. And so I did, and he very kindly agreed to come on the podcast. And that's what this episode is. I think within the podcast, we speak about a range of things, but the one thing that stood out for me is his obsession with olive oil. And I know that sounds a bit abstract, but he explains how olive oil was integral in his early life, his childhood. And it does go some way to explain why Mazen has done what he's done. We often think about wine in a very luxury context, and that's something he wants to try and change with olive oil. There's so many different types, thousands of different varieties of olive oil. You can have a sommelier within wine, an expert within wine. There's actually a sommelier within olive oil, and Mazen is one of those. He judges competitions. This guy's serious about his craft. He explains so well how he actually started the company. As you'd expect, it starts from a very small scale of importing olive oil from abroad and selling it on to restaurants. I love this episode, and I think you will too. So without further ado, that's it from me. Let's get on with it.
I knew immediately that in order to differentiate myself within this crowded market, I need to create something that looks wildly different to what's available on the shelves. There's two traits that people within entrepreneurship suffer from, which I have seen firsthand. First, dude, that's a difficult question to ask, I guess. Just start, literally, just start, see what happens.
Mazen, it is 7:03 on a Wednesday, 22nd of May. Brilliant to have you on. I've been looking forward to it all day. So, yeah, just ready to get going, to be honest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Will. It's such a pleasure to be here and to share more about my journey with you.
I always think before these episodes, is the founder that I'm about to speak to, were they always meant to start what they did, or was it by accident? Do some people just fall into it, or is it really just by design that the fact that they are now running and have founded a business? I wonder with you, Mazen, do you think there was any clues and hints in your early life and adult life that explain why you wanted to start the Olive Oil Guy?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, first of all, to your point, only time will tell if founders are the right fit for the business that they're building. In my case, I've been obsessed with food since I was a kid, and particularly olive oil. I mean, I grew up in Lebanon, where it's such a big part of our culture. We have the oldest olive trees in the world, around 6,000 years old. This dates back generations to ancient civilization in Mesopotamia. So we're very deeply connected to olive oil. And myself, as an individual, I absolutely loved food since I was a kid. I've been in the kitchen since I was a child. And, growing up in Lebanon and anywhere in the Mediterranean, you don't really buy olive oil at the supermarket. Every year, you have an aunt or an uncle or some family member or a friend that has a few olive trees that harvests the trees, presses the oil, and sends you a few containers to your house so you can cook with all year round. This is what I grew up with. and I grew up obsessed with it. And really, this obsession for food is what guides me in this journey and in this career as well. So
I'm just going through that. Why do you think olive oil was where you honed in on? Because there would have been other food influences in your upbringing, I would imagine. What was it about olive oil that drew you in?
that's a good question. I think when it comes to olive oil, first of all, it's one of those crafts that doesn't have or doesn't receive as much justice as it deserves in the average person's mind. We talk about wine as this craft
Hmm.
that has so many different varietals, and that restaurants um, provide you with pages and pages of options. And olive oil, similarly, is a craft. Why I chose to fall in love with olive oil, I can't really tell you, but what I do know is that the more I progress in this industry, the more I meet people that are just as obsessed or even more obsessed than me. And for the average person, you might think of this as just a fat or something to cook with. But once you actually start to look into this delicate good and how much people are obsessed with it and how culturally significant it is since the dawn of civilization, it starts to make sense. And this is part of what I call the olive oil awakening. My awakening happened first in Lebanon and then in Portugal when I tasted something
Hmm.
completely different. But there are so many other people that have different awakening moments, usually tied to their origin or to a trip somewhere. Um, and the whole movement of seeing this oil that is now seen as a commodity but is actually a craft is what I call the olive oil renaissance, and is what powers the whole ethos of the brand and everything that I do.
Hmm. When you definitely grew up with it, as you've explained, so it was clearly a part of your upbringing. Like, translating that to the UK, like you don't grow up with olive oil or olive trees, olive plants at all. So you just used to the standard bog standard olive oil from the supermarket. You don't really have an appreciation for it. So it sounds like from what you're saying, there's definite affiliation there just from your upbringing. It was present. There's probably a nostalgia to it. You attach it to certain family members. It played an important role in your life growing up.
Absolutely. And even another point, you touched on a very important point. I left Lebanon when I was 17 years old. I moved halfway across the world to Boston, which is not a Mediterranean place, obviously. And, in Boston, it became very apparent that olive oil was seen as this mystical Mediterranean product that people would enjoy in their foods, but that people didn't really understand as much about. And I think that's where I started really unraveling the mysteries behind olive oil. Similarly, here in the UK, everyone has at least a bottle of olive oil in their kitchen. Every supermarket
Mm.
or corner shop or food and wine has sells you olive oil, uh, but it's very mystical, and there's a lot of mystique and mystery behind it that needs to be unraveled. It's sort of like a representation of me moving from the Mediterranean and to America and now the UK, and taking this culture with me and sort of molding it to the local food cultures and how people eat and how people enjoy things and associate things as well.
This isn't obviously one of the questions we spoke about before, so feel free just to say no, I'm alright. But you mentioned the mystique, the mystery around olive oil. What does that mean? What needs to be unravelled? Are there elements that we just don't get, especially in the Western world when it comes to olive oil?
Yeah, the mystique around the world of olive oil has to do with how deeply connected it is to culture and history. I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier that since the dawn of civilization, since Mesopotamia, ancient civilizations have been growing olive trees, making olive oil, trading olives. In recent years, with the changes in the food systems, this delicate good has turned into a commodity. So putting olive oil on a bottle of olive oil is like just saying wine on a bottle of wine. 20, 30 years ago, it was either red wine or white wine.
Mm.
You walk into an average restaurant, they ask you red or white. Now there's Chablis, Sauvignon Blanc, Bordeaux, all these different varietals, wine varietals, sommeliers that can describe all the notes, flavor profiles, food pairings, and everything to do with the process. Olive oil, similarly, is a craft. There's 1,600 varieties of olives around the world. Each and every one gives you a different tasting oil. So imagine writing just olive oil on a bottle of olive oil. That is the confusing element, and that is what needs unraveling. And that is the
Mm.
mystique.
I couldn't believe it when, I think, just for the benefit of the audience, Mazen and I spoke a couple times before this recording. I couldn't believe it when you said there were 1,600 varieties of olive, and this is like the most ignorant thing in the world. I would have probably gone for about 15 at most, and that I'm blaming that on my upbringing in the UK, where you can probably buy about 4 different types from the supermarket, and you probably get exposed to about 6 different types in restaurants at most. But it just makes complete sense when you say that it's a bit like putting red or white as a labeling on wine, and doing the same for olive oil just makes absolutely no sense given the variety. So, again, just feel free to bat these away if you don't feel like you're prepped for them.
No, I think this is the nice part as well about this.
Go on.
Sorry, I was saying, I think this is, I'm enjoying this conversation. So feel free to go a bit off topic as well if it's in the realm of, yeah.
No, it's great. I'm genuinely really interested now. So, that is there one olive oil like type per olive? Is that the right way to categorize it? So you could have 1,600 different types of olive oil.
Yes. So you have 1,600 different olive varieties in the world, but you can have many more types of olive oil. So you're familiar with extra virgin, and then there's virgin olive oil, and there's refined olive oil, lampante. There's all sorts of different categories within olive oil beyond the varieties that go into production. Does that make sense? So
it does.
So if it's helpful, I'll explain a little bit about the process of how olive oil is made. So olive oil is always fresh. When around the fall, autumn period of the year, in the Mediterranean, these beautiful, gorgeous olive trees start to produce these fruits called olives. Farms all around the Mediterranean pick the olives and take them to a mill where they are cold pressed. These olives are put in these machines that crush the olives. This is called malaxation. When they're crushed, they turn into a paste. The paste is then taken to a centrifuge. The centrifuge spins the paste around, and 3 things come out: oil, water, and dry bits. This oil is then graded. If it is great quality, it is extra virgin. If it is bad quality, it is virgin. Extra virgin is always cold pressed. So remember, there's 3 things that come out: oil, extra virgin or virgin olive oil, cold pressed; dry bits, so this is like the remainders, they're like sand or sawdust, very dry; and water. The dry bits are then taken to another facility where they're exposed to heat, chemicals, and all sorts of different extraction methods that are very mechanical. And the fat molecules from the dry bits are extracted, and then they are deodorized, and they are bleached essentially to look transparent. And this is what we call refined olive oil. Now, refined is one of the best compliments in English. But when it
Mm.
comes to olive oil, refined is the worst quality olive oil. The problem is that when olive oil was commodified and exported to the West and outside of the Mediterranean and eastwards, some confusion started to come about in the industry where refined olive oil was marketed as just olive oil, light olive oil. So people think that it has less calories, but actually, refined olive oil is a chemically derived product. Extra virgin olive oil is the real craft. It's the real stuff that we judge in competitions and the real stuff that has so much depth and expertise, flavor profile, varietals. Because it doesn't matter what variety you press to make an oil. If it's chemically extracted, exposed to heat, you're just going to burn everything, all the flavor, all the health benefits, all of it. So extra virgin olive oil is the purest type of olive oil.
Great breakdown. I am literally learning so much here about, and I'm sure our audience are as well, about how olive oil is made. I had literally no clue about that. So yeah, that's extremely insightful. I'd be interested to know as well the your background before the olive oil guy, and then also how the fact you're an olive oil sommelier ties in with your previous jobs. Is that something that you've worked towards for many years, or is it something that you only started after starting the olive oil guy? Where does that tie in with your previous career?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my first job was in fast moving consumer goods. I worked at PepsiCo's international headquarters in New York. I started off by doing one of their trainings, cross functional trainings, everything from sales to operations to corporate to innovation, strategy, all sorts of different subject matters. Met a lot of people, and it's an amazing company to work at just because of the sheer exposure that you get and how mature it is in the market. So that was a great entry point into the world of FMCG and everything consumer goods. Um, then I took on a role in innovation at PepsiCo. So I was working directly with the head of innovations, and we were working really on new products that hadn't hit the market yet. How do you take them through every single department and make sure everyone is in check? So seeing the innovation pipeline was an incredible experience. This goes to the 5 points that we're going to discuss later, but I began in the olive oil space just purely out of passion. Again, something that goes back to early childhood, growing up in Lebanon.
Mm.
But I did the sommelier course really to improve my tasting skills and have the skills to describe what I'm tasting in a more standardized manner that is industry accepted. So tasting olive oil is incredibly subjective matter. It's like, how do you describe art? You might like different art than I do, but there are certain words and certain terms that are generally accepted within the art space. Similarly, within olive oil, there are certain words, certain terms, certain ways to taste that are the norm. So the thought process behind doing the course was to validate some of the things that I had learned over time, spending so much time in the fields with producers and working with these producers importing their oils, but also to further enhance my skills and, you know, gain that standardized approach to tasting. And that was a great decision. I mean, doing that course was a great decision. Absolutely.
And when did those ideas start to form that maybe it was worth starting a your own olive oil brand at some point?
Let's go back a bit to the origin because I want to give you this story in a chronological sense. Grew up in Lebanon, as I said, obsessed with food and with olive oil, growing up literally immersed in this culture, the Mediterranean culture. age 9, I traveled to Portugal with my dad, and I remember tasting something completely different to what I had back home. And that's when my awakening happened towards how intricate olive oil can be and how many varieties can be just by simply tasting it at age 9. Wow, dad, this tastes completely different to what we have back home. What's going on? And I remember that really, really, really clearly. Fast forward many years, I was in Boston. I had graduated from uni, began working at PepsiCo as I mentioned
Mm.
earlier. And I was at a farmer's market one day, and I met this guy who was selling olive oil from Spain, which is still one of the best olive oils I've ever tasted in my life. It's called Gordalia variety from La Laguna de Fuente de Piedra. Amazing, very unique oil. Anyway, I tasted his olive oil, and it tasted like nothing I had before. And that's when all these memories from childhood started to come back. And I was like, wow, oh my God. At that point, I wanted to start a nuts business because I'm obsessed with nuts as well.
The nuts guy.
The nuts guy. Maybe it doesn't
Yeah,
sound as attractive, does it?
it doesn't know.
But funny. Um, so at that point, I wanted to start a nuts business, and so I met this guy who was selling this olive oil, and it blew my mind. And so I picked up some literature, and I started to read about olive oil, the different varieties, the different types, the origins, and I met this guy called Paolo Pascali. He's one of the legends in Tuscany for olive oil. He's done so much innovation in the space throughout his life. Quite an amazing person, really. And he taught me everything to do with the olive oil. And that was an amazing experience. I mean, just learning from someone who was so deeply passionate was so infectious. And the people in this industry, as I said earlier, it's quite a nascent industry when it comes to seeing it as a craft. So any sommelier, any expert, anyone that's like an expert in this subject matter is very eager to help and find the next person that they can infect with this obsession. And so he infected me with this obsession. And I began importing his olive oil to Boston at the time, just as a side gig, as a hobby for fun.
Mm.
And I met a few other producers from different countries, and I was obsessed with the variety from all around the Mediterranean because to take it back to my early childhood, that experience in Lebanon, tasting Lebanese olive oil, and going to Portugal and tasting something completely different, I felt that was such a unique experience, which I wanted to replicate. And that was really the core motivation behind what I do. So I began importing from all these different producers in very small batches. It was like it was a for fun, really, and I became known amongst my friends as the guy that's obsessed with olive oil. And that's where the inspiration for the name, the olive oil guy, comes from, because I literally couldn't shut up about it. That business did not take off, but it was an intro into this whole world. Meeting Paulo, being infected by his passion, diving deeper into this world, beginning to import, and starting to be known amongst my friends, local chefs, people I've met as that guy that's obsessed with olive oil, aka the olive oil guy. That's really the foundation of the story and where it started for me. And based on that experience, that's when I decided to do the sommelier course and start to
Mm.
validate all of these learnings that I've gained by meeting all of these producers, visiting their lands, visiting their groves, harvesting with them. I began to validate and learn the standard for tasting and how to describe how I taste. And that was another great decision because fast forward to today, I'm now sitting on international panels tasting over 800 olive oils and judging. Um, so, all great experiences that have served the purpose in very interesting ways.
something that struck me when you were talking. So you started to import olive oil from this guy's company. I think he was in Tuscany, if that's right. And so you were importing. What were you doing once you were importing? Were you then speaking to local restaurants and letting them know that there's this amazing olive oil I have, that you should try it? Was there other things that you were doing to put your name out there? Because all that then leads to the fact you were known as the olive oil guy, or the guy that is obsessed with olive oil. What practically were you doing after you were importing this oil right at the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think the word importing is giving it a lot of justice. We would literally send them by DHL, which is really expensive, as
Sorry.
you can imagine. Uh, but that's another lesson in entrepreneurship. You have to be scrappy. I mean, I was really
Mm.
scrappy with it. I was just getting it because I wanted people to experience the different flavors that I was experiencing and understand and have that awakening moment. I wanted to, just like Paulo infected me, I wanted to infect others as well. Just like that moment in Portugal that infected me and gave me this awakening, I wanted to give others their awakening as well. That was the motivation. It wasn't really to get this product, import it, and sell it. I'm not a trader. I was more of someone that's delivering an experience. And because I believe that that experience awakened something in me. And that's what I wanted to replicate, really.
No, that makes sense. Actually, I think it's simpler than I was expecting, but it all derives from that absolute love for the product and just wanting others to try it, and that then takes forms in many ways. It could be then you go to restaurants and say to them, look, you should try this oil. It's absolutely incredible. You should give it to your friends and family, and let them know of what you've got. I suppose it's getting your name out there, isn't it? I'm drawn to day zero because we've given a bit of context now around the bit before you started the olive oil guy. But as you've hit the nail on the head here, there are other players in the market, and you've taken that decision that you want to start creating your own company, your own brand. So you've noted here the differentiating factor within a crowded market was a key consideration from day zero. How did you approach that?
Yeah. So when I knew I wanted to start the olive oil guy, the question then became, how can I find a differentiating factor within a really crowded market with thousands of players? Having been in London for a few years, at the point when I started the olive oil guy, I was such a big admirer of the craft movement in coffee, in chocolate, in
Mm,
beer. Seeing brands like Tony's, Chocolate Only, like
mm.
Brewdog, like many other brands in the market, be it in beer, wine, coffee, chocolate. I was really inspired by the motivation behind their brands and how they were able to differentiate themselves within a market and allow people to see their product as different. Um, so when I when I would visit supermarkets in London, I noticed that the olive oil shelves are flooded with the same types of products. They all look archaic, boring, uninspiring. There's nothing really different about them. And I knew immediately that in order to differentiate myself within this crowded market, I need to create something that looks wildly different to what's available on the shelves.
Mm.
This is a concept that is now deemed by branding experts as chaotic branding. So many people are doing it everywhere. And you see it in all forms of categories. The idea behind it is that if you put a product, here we Flow, for example,
Mm.
Flow, it's a femcare brand, very successful. Tara's a great founder that has done really well. They put tampons in an ice cream tub. When an individual
Okay.
goes in the supermarket and sees a, a packaging type from another category
Mm.
within this category, they start to think, what is this? Immediately it draws attention. The question goes from like, do I go extra virgin to virgin, or what is this and why does it look so different? You understand what I mean? So the idea was I wanted to create something that looked wildly different, but also I was really attached to the idea of creating a packaging that has utility behind it, that has certain points of difference that are useful for people. So we ended up going with the tins, the round tins, for two reasons. One reason being what I just described, the chaotic branding with different colors, something that will catch people's attention, catch people's eyes. But another reason is quality and sustainability. So olive oil really, really degrades when it's exposed to light. That's why I decided to put my bottles in a can, because cans would protect the olive oil from light exposure and extend the shelf life and extend the quality so people can get fresher olive oil all the time. And the second perspective was that the whole life cycle of a product, transportation is probably one of the largest and most consuming bit. And cans, as you know, are much lighter than glass. So I knew that by putting the product in a can that's stackable and that's easily transportable and that's light, we can achieve some efficiencies in the whole life cycle, and it will be a more sustainable packaging option when compared to glass or other materials. So that was really the inspiration behind the differentiating branding, packaging style, colors, and direction.
I'll tell you what I think, Mazen. If
Yeah.
I walked past the olive oil section in a supermarket, which I'd probably do once a week, first of all, I agree with you. The other brands are very bland. I mean, they look alright. I mean, they're presentable, but they're not exciting. They're in glass. They're almost always in glass or plastic packaging. They look very, very similar. If I saw your product, I would probably buy it. But and the reason I'm not even going to say that I appreciate olive oil so much that I would have done the analysis and that's why I would have bought it. I'd be tempted to buy it just off the packaging to start off with, because it does look so different. I'll make sure I put a couple of pictures on this episode, but it does look so different, and the way that it's been designed, like it makes you feel good. It's just a cool design. And I think people are always, it's like almost underestimated. People are so drawn to that design at the beginning. It gives them a feeling. People are almost buying that feeling because they can take it home and stack it. So I'm looking over my kitchen over there. The camera's not pointing, but they can take it home and put it on their kitchen top. And every time they walk past, they'll see that design and it gives them a bit of joy. I actually believe that. So from my perspective, I think you've done so well with the packaging and the branding. Were you directly involved, or did you hire an agency? What was the story behind
Uh,
it?
yeah, of course. I mean, I worked with a freelancer who was very talented,
Yeah.
and we it took 1 year to get to the design that we got
Wow.
to,
Wow.
just because we wanted to make sure that we're not just saying, "Oh, give me olive oil with funky branding and see what happens." No, we had to think through every single color palette, every single um, use, shape, why things are there. Um, the first iterations of the olive oil guy look nothing like this one. And
Okay.
maybe one day I will share that with people. But yeah, it's this creative work is something I love doing, and it was amazing to work very closely with her to put it together. Yeah, absolutely.
No, you've done a great job.
Thank
Day
you.
one, day one, becoming a figure in the industry. I'm not even putting this achievement down, but from what we've spoken about, this one seems quite a natural one for you to be quite good at, given that you ever since very early on in your life, you've been almost had a maniacal focus on olive oil, especially as that interest grew. Naturally, you started to import, or as you kind of underplay it slightly, get it shipped by DHL to where you are from Tuscany, and then make your friends aware and make local residents and restaurants aware of this great oil. So I think naturally you were doing that anyway before day one, and then once you have your brand, the olive oil diet guy is now a day old. You're starting to become a figure in the industry. You want to branch out. I would imagine that this is quite a natural thing for you to do. And I don't, again, please tell me if I'm wrong, but it wouldn't have taken a lot of effort to have done this. It would have been a very natural course.
Thank you. That's a big compliment, and I really appreciate it. I think one of my philosophies is that I'm I'm here because I care about what I'm doing. I really, really care about what I'm doing. And entrepreneurship is such a difficult journey, such a difficult thing to do. So the fact that I care so much about olive oil, about food, about consumer goods, about this whole world is what drives me every single day to get up in the morning and go again. Even when everything is going wrong, that's what keeps driving me. And I think that's the most important thing for anyone going into their journey to remember. You have to keep in mind always, every single day, why you are doing what you're doing and what is your inspiration. This is what helps me, really.
And as part of that effort to become a figure in the industry, so you say I met over 80 producers from around the world. This experience was amazing for many reasons. I tested and refined my pitch, got a deeper understanding of the industry. I visited Greece, Spain, Italy, Tunisia. Best decision I ever took. So what period was this in? I appreciate we're on day one right now, but I imagine it's still going. Did you have a plan about, okay, I need to go here or here? How did you structure that journey?
So at this point, day one of the company, I had just come up with the name, the olive oil guy, uh, based on all of these experiences in Boston, importing oil, being obsessed with oil, and all of the things that we discussed earlier. Day one, I was speaking to my amazing partner, who's one of the most supportive people ever, and I noticed that there was the largest food exhibition in the world going on in Paris. It's called Cial Paris, and the day after was the last day of the exhibition. So I told myself, this is my chance to go and literally fast track all of the development, meet all the people I need to meet, pitch, refine, um, and throw myself into this world. It really couldn't have happened more serendipitously than it did. Literally on a silver platter, the largest food exhibition was just one stop away from King's Cross St. Pancras Station. So sitting on my phone at 11:30 at night, I was like, okay, I need to book my ticket. Tomorrow's the last day. I'm going. And I just went on my phone. I booked my ticket. I got up the next morning, 6 in the morning, got all of my stuff, went to King's Cross Station, arrived to the largest food exhibition in the world, met over 80 people in person. And at this point, I obviously had my experience being a sommelier and importing these oils from Tuscany that I discussed earlier, but I still didn't know enough about how the industry worked and how the business side of the industry works. So going and meeting all of the producers from small family owned farms to large conglomerates that don't even have any farms, that just buy oil and resell it to you, that gave me so much context as to what I'm looking for and what types of people I'm looking for. And I'm a firm believer in the energies of people. And I have a policy that I want to work with people that lift you up, that are not snobbish, and just meeting these people in person and seeing which ones of them take me seriously and which ones of them don't, and which ones of them are responsive and which ones of them don't, and tasting their oils in person, knowing which ones of them are cheating people and which ones of them are obsessed like I am. That was an incredible experience. And I actually met some of the producers that I work with today there, and I still work with them there. And now they're like family. And I visit them, I travel to their homes, to their villages, and we sit down and we have these amazing meals with their whole family. And this all happened just because one night my amazing partner told me to book a ticket to Paris, and I did it. And yeah, I that's it. That's day one. That's the story. I walked in there with the name, the olive oil guy, and just tried to meet as many people as I could, and that's it. That's the story.
And for others that maybe are now on day one listening to this, is that generally a good idea? Where you should be going to industry events and meeting as many people in the industry that you're in, build those connections early.
Yeah, absolutely. I think absolutely. Again, you have to keep in mind also what stage of maturity your idea is at, meaning like how mature the project you're working on is. Because the last thing you want to do is walk into one of these places and give off the wrong vibe or wrong energy, or even have someone that's way down
Mm.
the line take one of your brilliant ideas. So you always have to be careful. But in my case, I mean, I had already leading up to that, I had already imported some oils, met so many people, been a sommelier. I knew what I was talking about. So I was looking
Mm.
for people to work with. So it was easier to say that I was looking for people to work with. But regardless, industry events are super important. You can go there with a different alias, change your name, change your company name, change whatever. Not even pitch, but just go there, meet, see how people are. Even looking at people in your industry and maybe people that are a lot older than you that have been in that industry for a while, looking at how they behave. Are they happy? Are they nice? These are all considerations that I think about sometimes. I see people who have 20 years experience in the olive oil space, and I look at them and I'm like, is that what I want to be in 20 years? Is that the type of person that I want to be? Because that's super important.
Yeah, it's those non-verbal cues, isn't it, that you don't really get unless you go to these events where you
Yeah.
can get a real sense for who's into it, who's maybe just doing it for money. As you said, you've got a good knowledge base of olive oil. You are really, really obsessed by it, and you can obviously tell, I'm sure quite easily, who else is on the same level as you, and then who else is sort of half-assed about it. And then you've made good contacts with those individuals like yourself who are just so passionate. And really, I mean, maybe a generalization, but you would bet on the individuals that are really passionate about it doing better and growing faster and having a better reach than the others who maybe you don't want to be in 20 years time.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very lucky with one thing. I think too, I'm very lucky in general, and I'm super grateful as a person. I feel like I'm blessed, and I'm really happy. I feel blessed for everything that the world has given me and my family has given me. And um, there's two traits that people within entrepreneurship suffer from, which I have seen firsthand. First, it's the imposter syndrome, and second is the fear of disappointment. I'm very lucky that I don't feel the imposter syndrome. I was able to walk into that room and say I'm the olive oil guy, and I still do it. I'm 27 years old. I walk into a room, people who have 20 years of
Mm.
experience, they might hate me for it, but I'm proud of the passion that I have. But I go in with an open mind saying, it's correct. I call myself the olive oil guy. The brand is called the olive oil guy, but listen, I have a lot to learn, and I have a lot to learn from you. because you've been here for 20 years. But that doesn't mean I go in with the energy of, I don't know anything. I'm, you go in with confidence. You have to get rid of this imposter syndrome, because you you are able to, if you are passionate enough, you can be smart enough to figure it out, and there's always a way out. My main issue so far when it comes to entrepreneurship, and I'm being as vulnerable as I can, is the fear of disappointment.
Mm.
One of my main reasons of why I do what I do is because I genuinely want to make my family proud and my loved ones. And this is where it started again with everything, right? Going back to Lebanon with this whole origin, that hinders me a lot. The fear of disappointment. That is where my issue is. So people really need to tune into these and be honest with themselves and try to go beyond these fears that they have, whether it's imposter syndrome, am I good enough, am I strong enough, or fear of disappointment, will I disappoint my client, will I let them down, will I disappoint my family, will I let them down, will I disappoint my friends, am I a loser? These are the two things that I think are a huge hindrance to people in the entrepreneurship space.
But let's talk about imposter syndrome for just a couple minutes in a sec, because I want to ask you a couple of things on that. But what does disappointment? How do you define disappointment?
Dude, that's a difficult question to ask. I guess disappointment is building up this idea of what can be and not executing on it and achieving it. That's what disappointment is.
It's a difficult one, though, isn't it? Because I think, in my view, disappointment would almost be not trying in the first place. Trying and then not achieving it straight away, or the first time, or the second time. I don't know. I appreciate that's where you're coming from, but yeah, I don't know if others would see it that way. I don't know.
Yeah, I think disappointment also can be not doing it in the first place, because that will lead to regret and disappointment. But that's assuming in your head that you want to do it. You understand what I mean? So in your head, you're putting this idea that you want to do something and then you don't do it. So putting an idea that you don't deliver on, that's disappointment.
I also think I've had this somewhere else, but the regrets you have are often things that you didn't do rather than the things that you did do. And so that's why I was connecting that first point around just not trying in the first place. But it's interesting you say that. Do you think it's really a fear of failure, or is it more personal, where you feel like others have now put their like hopes and trust in you, your family, for example, and you don't want to let them down?
Yeah, for sure. Others have put hope, trust. It's also an idea that you put in your head of who you want to be and not reaching up to that. And sometimes people, I've seen this a lot with a lot of people in the corporate world, they put this idea of who they want to be and they drop everything in their life to get there. And then they look back and they might have millions in the bank and be super successful in their career, but they have no one next to them. No family, no friends, nothing, no community, So there's always a balance to all of that as well, right? How much do you love the subject matter? I love olive oil, but will I love olive oil to the point to drive me crazy? Maybe not.
Hard balance, though. Hard balance, because I think about this. You've summed it up really well. Like, how much time do you dedicate to like enjoying or living your life now and spending it with family and friends, having experiences, and then how much do you dedicate to your passion? Maybe you can combine the two in some way, but it's a very difficult balance, isn't it? Because in one extreme and the other seems to be not the right answer. But it's like the balance thing is so hard.
Yeah. And this is something that people have struggled with again from the dawn of civilization, really. I
Yeah.
mean, there's no answer to it. But for me, I find clarity in consistent routine and
Mm.
in detaching myself from certain elements to do with work. That gives me clarity to come back with more energy and a clearer, more creative mind.
Mm.
And
On the other point, imposter syndrome, I've thought about this a bit. I'm like you in a way. So I don't, for example, this podcast, maybe the first episode, I was a bit nervous, but I don't really feel it in that sense. But I was thinking about this. If you, especially in your case, you didn't feel imposter syndrome, I'd say it's like the logical thing to say. I'd say it's probably the right thing that you felt because you had done the sommelier course already. You had a pretty good knowledge of olive oil. You could argue in some ways probably better in areas than others that had been in the industry more, especially if they hadn't cared. So I think in that respect you were like you weren't an imposter. You weren't completely new to the concept. You knew what you were talking about. So I think in that regard, that's probably why, or explains partly why you felt like you did. If you hadn't done anything and were just day one rocked up and felt like didn't feel imposter syndrome, or to be honest, just didn't feel like you knew what you were talking about, which would obviously be true if you just come into it, then I think that again would be a fair feeling of like, oh shit, like maybe I don't deserve to be here. I think what's always straight, the harder one to explain, and the less logical one is where I think it's rarer, but where people are extremely knowledgeable in a field but still feel like they shouldn't be there.
I think you see it everywhere. Maybe at face value, it's less rare, but you see it everywhere. There are some people that might know a lot less than you that are making decisions on a
Mm.
certain subject matter. That you see it everywhere. We don't need to get into the specifics of where, but it's everywhere.
Day 50, joining a startup community. Entrepreneurship is a lonely journey, and if you're a solo founder, it's even lonelier. I set out to find the perfect community and startup incubator from whom I can learn from and share my struggles. This was an incredible decision.
Correct. It's such a lonely journey, man. Honestly, I would recommend to anyone starting something, if you find the right co-founder, work with a co-founder. But the emphasis has to be on the right. Because things change in entrepreneurship. One day you're doing something, the next day you're doing the next, and you have to keep figuring it out and changing and moving and pivoting and refining. And this is just how the model works. In my case, I didn't find the right person in the early days. And now I'm a little bit too late in my journey to take in a co founder. So that's just my situation. But it is such an incredibly lonely journey, an echo chamber. Any decision you're debating two sides. In my case, I'm both sides. So you almost feel crazy sometimes. So if you can find the right co-founder that's complements your skills, aligns on your vision, that you have, most important thing, you have a good working relationship with, because that is the most important thing. You might disagree on decisions, but ultimately it's all about respect. You have to have mutual respect for one another. Not always in agreement, but always together and respectful of each other's opinions.
Is there anyone you had in place instead of a co-founder? Because I can't firsthand relate to it. I haven't started a business, But from what I hear from other founders, that is for sure something that is common, especially if you're the single founder, where there's nights and days where you're just working away and you haven't got someone to bounce ideas off. And even if you do with friends, they're not necessarily going through the same thing you're going. So there's always that gap in relatability. So how did you get through the days of loneliness?
I had a very clear vision of what I needed done, and again, I'm blessed to have met amazing people along the way who have helped me, be it the designers that I have worked with, be it the web developers that I've worked with, be it the producers that I've worked with. These are all stakeholders in the business that without I could never have done all the small things I've done so far in the whole context of the journey. But I could have never done anything. Um,
The next step was then to collect feedback and refine. And you mentioned that on day 100, adapting to feedback and relaunching my brand. So that who was the feedback from? Were you testing it out with potential customers, family, friends?
yeah.
How
So
did you have that process of feedback?
we went a little bit off topic in the last day, but just to give context, when I joined this community, I joined a community called NEF, which is a Center for Entrepreneurship. And the whole point was to meet all of these different founders from all over the UK that are changing so much in various different industries. The condition to join the program was I had to have my product launch by the first day of the program. That put a deadline on me to deliver. I could have taken a year more to deliver something, but that put a deadline. By this day, whatever it was, May 1st, I need to have a product in hand ready to deliver. So the first week of the program, I love the story. The first week of the program, they gave us a challenge. They put each founder in a group of four. Um, they put all of us in groups of four. And they gave us a challenge. You have to make £1,000 in 1 week with no money spent, no budget, just your brains, and that's it. So I told the group, listen, guys, I just received my batch of olive oil because that was the first day. I literally got my first batch of olive oil on the first day of this course to hit the deadline. So I told the group, listen, guys, I just received my first batch of olive oil. Do you want to try and sell it all? And they were like, yeah, let's do it. So a few of my amazing friends, Bo, Sam, Klaus, Yumna, helped me put together a gorgeous website. And they all had their own companies and all had their own ventures. They helped me put together a gorgeous website that went live. The e-commerce website went live in 2 days. And we set up a stand in Shoreditch at the Truman Brewery. And we just got all of the bottles. Literally, we paid like £20 for the stand, something like that. Like, it was pretty cheap. Just put all of the bottles on the table and just had people come and get feedback, try to sell as much as we can. And we pushed it. And by the end of the week, we were able to make £900 in profit just by putting all of our brains together to try to get over this challenge that was presented to us. And the most beautiful part about this whole story is that first, with a deadline and a clear goal set in place, it was a lot easier to operate. And second, having that community of people that all had the same goal and was working with a very positive manner just allowed us to work so much better and faster. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, they're now some of my best friends really from this program. And I hope they're listening to this podcast because I'll never forget this experience. And it's one I'll repeat forever. Yeah.
Great story. Yeah, what was the interaction like with the public for the stall that you set up? What was it pretty harsh? Was it mixed? Did everyone love it? How valuable was the feedback?
it was a mix of two things, which I loved it because it validated what we set out in the branding when we started. People at the market either loved it or hated it. The comments were either, "Oh my god, this is so cool," or "Oh my god, is that motor oil?" You understand what I'm saying? So we got a very split reaction. And what I really loved is that when we began designing the product, I told my designer at the time, I want to create something that people will either love or hate. Because my hypothesis was that if you create something that's for everyone, you're going to end up with something that's for no one. We wanted to break that barrier, introduce the olive oil guy to the market, make people pay attention with something that looks completely different and attracts their attention. And I think that's what was most successful about the first launch. So launching that at the brewery was actually just a soft launch, right? And it attracted a lot more attention than I thought it would. So that was a great experience, and that takes us into the next topic, which is adapting to feedback and relaunching the brand.
And before we go, before we go into that, I completely agree about the love-hate dynamic that you'd identified. I recently put a post out about this, so that I think you only need something like, if you even had 99 people in a row in front of you and they're all saying like, your product is awful, and you had one person that was like, this is fantastic, like I absolutely love it, even that ratio, if you apply it to the UK, that's 700,000 customers. If they're buying one bottle of olive oil even every 2 months, I mean, that's a significant amount of revenue. So to your point, focus on, like, be specific, make it either people absolutely love it or hate it, because otherwise, as you've just articulated, if you have something that's so bland, everyone's like, oh, that's all right. Like, no one is going to go for it and no one's going to massively dislike it. It's kind of a bad outcome in marketing terms.
Of course. Of course. You said it perfectly, man. I mean, and what's even more interesting was seeing the people that went from hating it to loving it. That was even more interesting. And some of my best friends were part of the people that hated it and were brutally honest and now love it and are my best customers. And that's what I love. That's what I enjoy. That's what I enjoy.
But do they love it because they've tried it and they like the taste?
They love it. They've tried it, and literally branding grew on them. It's like when you keep looking at something enough, you can start to see it differently.
Yeah. Well, and also people are used to how olive oil should look. And so some people, I'm sure, were like really refreshed by the idea of a totally different design, but others would be like, this isn't how olive oil should be at all. Like, it should be in a very traditional, like, glass-based product that, meets certain standards. It shouldn't be in a tin and have a contemporary design on. So it's probably just a natural reaction to breaking the status quo. Actually, it's probably a really good thing that people didn't like it. It's a leading indicator that you're breaking the mold a bit and doing something a bit different.
Yeah, you're getting someone's opinion. I wanted this packaging to be remembered and to be loud, and that was the goal that I set out. But now I'm relaunching the brand. So as I said, the original launch was always meant to be a soft launch. It went way better than I thought it would. And now I've been around enough. I've done enough things that I've gathered enough feedback, data, understanding the market, that I feel I have just landed on the next big thing in the olive oil space. And my whole relaunch revolves around the next thing that I'm going to do, which isn't released yet, but that's coming in the next few months. And it is beyond just creating different looking packaging or creating something that people love or hate. It's, in my opinion, has the opportunity to really change people's perceptions. And this is what excites me most about it. This is what excites me most. Yeah.
Might have to have you on in a few months because I'm slightly drawn into that. What this is going to be now.
The next thing is gonna be huge. I'm preparing for this launch. It's taken ages, but it's gonna be huge. I'd love to walk you through a bit like that whole feedback process, launching the brand. I do have to leave a few bits and pieces out just because it's not out yet. But sorry, if you give me a second. Sorry about that.
Absolutely fine. Go for it. Day 100,
Day 100.
adapting to feedback and relaunching my brand. How do you know which feedback to listen to and which not? Because you would have got an array from your pop up in Shoreditch. Obviously, some good, some bad. Yeah. How do you know which ones to go with? Is it more gut? Is it analysis? How did
It's
you?
staying true to yourself on what your vision is. Um, Again, going back to what I said earlier in this call, the vision always was olive oil is a craft. I want people to see it as a craft, just like they see wine, chocolate, coffee. Being the olive oil guy with funky branding was a step towards launching myself into this industry and
Yeah.
allowing people to pay attention, but it was never the end goal. I don't want to be the guy that's known for colorful packaging. I want to push forward this renaissance, which I'm talking about. So it's staying true to myself. That's absolutely first thing. The second thing is listening to who's buying from you. Who are your clients? Who are the people that want to buy your products? Who are you naturally attracting? I had one of my policies when I first launched, when I soft launched the olive oil guy was I had a zero gifting policy just because I wanted to see who will actually buy the product from my friends. I didn't want them to just have it because they're my friends. And obviously, now that it's been around for a while, they get unlimited olive oil and they're quite happy about it. But that was like purposefully done so zero gifting to see who would buy it. And what ended up happening is when I launched the brand, I attracted three types of clients, mainly because I am a sommelier. So Harrods being first, which I'm so grateful to be working with. Two, Michelin restaurant called Joël Robuchon. They have amazing They have 31 stars. They're literally all over the world with Michelin restaurants. I curated an olive oil menu for them. And three, Le Cordon Bleu, which is a renowned cooking school. These three people came to me not because I have different color branding or different. These people came to me because of my sheer love and deep passion for olive oil and expertise, which I developed and happened to develop across the years. This is why they choose to work with me because I'm so passionate. I'm not trying to sell them something. Actually, I am trying to provide them with a new lens and education on gastronomy, which is all in line with what they do, creating these gastronomic experiences. And it's really tuning into those clients that I began to understand, okay, this is the value I bring to the market. It's not being the guy with funky branding. It's the guy that's unraveling the mysteries behind olive oil. It's the guy that's talking about olive oil like it's something from God, which it is. You understand? So that was the feedback that I tuned in. How do you listen to the feedback? Listen to the people that are buying from you. They're the ones that will be straightforward, honest, and open with you. And listen to your gut as to what you want to do. And my gut has always been I want to unravel this craft and push forward the Renaissance. So that's it, I guess. Yeah, that's it.
Follow your passion and do what you love is something you hear banded around quite a lot. And and we've all heard it for all of our lives, but it doesn't really like you understand it, but you don't. Like you kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. Like sure, yes, you should do that, but the last hour has really hit home for me like the importance of doing that, and then the benefit of also following what you love, because all of the things that we've set out in the first 100 days, like adapting to feedback, startup, community, becoming a figure in the industry, differentiating factor, like they're all things that are bound to the fact that you are like obsessed with olive oil and wanting to unravel that mystery, that mystique. It doesn't really happen unless you have that core love for olive oil. And so I think like, yeah, it's super important to outline how you did it in the first 100 days. But I think a lot of it is just natural from that initial love. So if there's anything I've taken from this episode, it's like, if you haven't started a business, just really think about what gets you going and try a few different things. What do you feel a good emotion about? Because if you can get that, I think a lot of the stuff here comes naturally. I don't think you necessarily need a rule book after, like, before you start. It's just that initial love and wanting to understand it to a depth that no one else quite does.
Absolutely. And if I had one piece of advice to any founder or aspiring founder out there, it's just start. Literally, just start. See what happens. I started by getting DHL olive oil and not even making any money on it. But that's how I started, you know. At some point, I wanted to go into the music industry. And I actually had radio shows with a cousin of mine who's a musician who I was supporting in various ways. I figured out very quickly that music is not the type of work I want to do. But just start, get going, take the first step, and you will figure it out eventually. Don't let it break you. You will hit stumbling, like, what do you call it? Like, you will hit like issues along the way, but don't let it break you. Pivot, change, refine, keep going, keep going. This is my take.
What a way to end. Mazen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Will. Really, honestly, this really felt like almost a therapy session talking, and it's really been a pleasure, man. So thank you so much, Will.
No, like I completely agree. I like it's, you know what's strange? I don't know. I either had this or I won't. But at some points, I felt like I was just listening to a podcast, like that's already been recorded. Like, especially at the beginning where you were going through your upbringing and like the exposure you had with olive oil, that kind of thing. I was like, oh, this is great. Like, what's he going to say next? And then I was like, shit, I've got to like say something now.
Great. You asked me two questions. I'm gonna be a little bit brief, but I did prepare something for you.
Okay.
If you do need to go, that's completely fine. I also probably need to
No?
go, but I feel like these questions are really important. You can choose to use them if you like, or if not. But is there anything you know to be true that no one else really
Yes.
understands in the context of starting a business? Being the best salesman on the planet is actually the worst job on the planet. And what I mean by that is when you're really good at sales, when you're so good at sales that you're too good for your own good, that's a problem. Because
Yeah.
when you
Okay.
see your clients as a way to get money and you just try to sell them anything, what ends up happening is they will realize very quickly that what you're selling them, they don't need. And when you're building your whole business around some clients that will buy stuff from you, as opposed to people that you are nurturing with a solution and trying to grow with, if you see them as just people who will buy stuff from you, then eventually what will happen is when they figure out they don't fucking need it, you're going to lose a lot of money. So being the best salesman is actually awful. This is my view. This is my view. I hope that's helpful for your podcast. You don't need to include it, but this is something I've learned. I've said it before, like with the people I work with, I don't do it to sell things to them, but I do it because I care about what they do and I believe in what I'm providing to them.
I think people can smell the disingenuous nature of a true salesman, and you've taken the opposite approach where it's like clear you're delivering like the want for passion and the like the information that you have. You're just so you're so into that specific subject. I don't think anyone would see it as being sold to. So I think being natural in that regard is right. I think the only thing actually I was going to ask that I thought we are at time, but just quickly, they always say like don't, if your passion becomes a job, it stops becoming a passion because there's money involved. Do you feel like that you're battling that to a degree, or you're still as passionate as you were before you were like making any money from olive oil?
No, I think I'm still as passionate as I was,
Yeah.
but I likely need someone who's passionate about making money to come and help me out to grow the business because there is a balance. You're right, Will. There is
Yeah,
a
true.
balance.
Very true.
So
No, I'm glad you said that at the end. That's a very good point.
yeah, see how that sounds
Well,
at last bit. If you feel like we need to include it, I don't think necessarily, but see how it feels. I feel like we ended on a natural tone earlier, so feel it out. But that's honestly, I just wanted to share it because you asked the question, and I know it comes from a place of interest. So yeah, I hope that I hope that was a good answer for you. That's it. Yeah.
thank you as always for listening. Yeah, I've listened to that one a few times. I think it's just so clear how much he's like obsessed with his product. It rubs off on you. I think I left feeling like I wanted to find out more about olive oil, to be honest, and I had a clear understanding about how he actually started the olive oil guy. I know there's more to come. He has a product line coming out, so keep your eyes tuned. Keep your ears peeled. Which one is it? I'll put the info in the show notes and all the links you need. So that's it from me. Next week we have the founder of a Southeast London startup brand that delivers fresh coffee and bread to your door. Honestly, a sick idea. I'm almost jealous of it.